invention is applied physics. You just have to take what's there, and it's applied engineering.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome back. What's up? What's up? That's a voice crack. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting, and you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 194, and today's guest is George Carter III. George Carter III is an astounding, impeccable, just spectacular inventor, best known for creating laser tag. George is recognized as the founder and inventor and basically father and godfather of the laser tag industry after he invented Photon, the world's first commercialized game of laser tag. He also has invented several other things that are super duper cool, including having a huge part in bumper boats, ATVs, all sorts of vehicles ranging from motorized surfboards to racetrack dryers to jet skis to things in the sky. And in this interview, we talk George's approach to inventing, his mind-blowing inspiration from laser tag from a movie that not many people know about, how he goes from idea to prototype to successful business, and we wrap up with a rapid-fire Q&A session unlike any other that turns into a look at some of the celebrity friends George has met along the way. Just to note that George is pretty off the grid these days, so we did this interview via phone call on his end, so the audio quality might not be quite as good as you're used to hearing. But trust me, your ears will adjust fast, and listen closely because George is rather inventive. It is the Carter III. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with one of the coolest inventors you will come across, somebody who has a laser focus, pun intended, George Carter III, as he loves to be known as George Carter III, right, phonetically. George, really, really amazing career and lifetime of inventions that we'll get to today. Thanks so much for making time. How are you doing today?
Doing well.
Perfect. Couldn't have said it any better myself. But no, we're going to get into your inventions, and obviously laser tag is what you're most well known for, and I think so many of us have amazing memories growing up playing laser tag in some sort, and a huge thank you goes to you for making that happen in the first place. Before that, you had a pretty cool run-in with Fleetwood Mac on your initial racetrack. You mind sharing that story?
But it wasn't actually the initial one, but it was a really interesting thing because they became investors in another track that I built. They visited the one that I had in Phoenix, and it was right across the street from the Legend City amusement park, which is owned by, I remember his first name. His last name is Nix, and his daughter is Stevie Nix.
Nick, I was going to say that name sounds very familiar when you're speaking of Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, I can't. Jesse Nix was his name. And they had an outdoor concert venue there and had rock bands and that and all the time. One of the nights that they had their group over there, Fleetwood Mac, I was working the raceway right across the street, diagonally across the street. And we usually close about midnight. And right around midnight, a couple of limos pull up. And we were just in the process of closing down. And a guy comes in and introduces himself as being a manager for Fleetwood Mac and wanted to know if they could rent the place for the next couple of hours. And he started pulling out $100 bills. So I said, yeah, we'll consider it. So a bunch of them piled in there, and they had a really good time and drove the cars, for like 2 hours until like 2 a.m. They had a good time, and as they left, this same business manager handed me his card and said, "This is an interesting business. I'd like to talk to you about it." And I'd heard that 100 times, that sort of thing from people, and didn't think anything about it. But about a month later, he gave me a call from his office in Beverly Hills and wanted to know if I wanted to come over and meet and talk about doing some sort of business arrangement. So it all boiled down to the fact they became investors and provided the cash to build a similar track in Dallas, which is what caused me to move to Dallas.
Oh my God! So you have a history. You're basically we'll call you the secret weapon groupie of Fleetwood Mac. So we'll put that into your resume as well. That's amazing though. So what's going through your mind when this manager shows up, starts giving you $100 bills, and you find out that, oh my God, members of Fleetwood Mac are going to use my business, my inventions.
That was not new to me because they'd been over there before, and I knew that they performed over there a lot. So I wasn't too surprised by that part. But everybody that comes in and does this has a really good time. It was really a fun track. It was my first Grand Prix racetrack, which is one of these single lap tracks where you don't go out and race wheel to wheel with other people. You're on a timer, and we let cars out of every 15 seconds, and they're all out on the track at the same time, but they're not supposed to catch one another. So it's a timed event. And we were able to build a track that was the fastest one in the world at the time. The cars were capable, if you're a good enough driver, capable of about 55 miles an hour top speed. And the thing that was really unique about those cars was they were two-seaters. Almost all of the other Grand Prix racetracks were single-seat cars. So it's just a lot more fun with the passenger with you. And it's actually a pretty scary ride with the passenger when you're not in control of the car.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, if you're going through road trips on just like in a normal car through a winding road, like most of the time you feel more control. You feel more likely to be less dizzy, if that makes any sense, when you are the driver. So I can imagine whipping through an open air like that as the passenger in one of those cars must have been a trip. So we've stumbled already onto one of your inventions. So the two-seater concession star. I just invented another one for you. Concession car like that. How did you have the idea to add an extra seat to that?
Well, that was kind of an accident. It goes back to way before then when I think my second invention. The invention was a mini dune buggy. This was in the 60s, and dune buggies were, really popular in Phoenix and in Southern California. And there was a car called a Myers Manx that was built. You'd get a Volkswagen, you'd saw the frame, take a big chunk out of it, weld it back together, and then put this body on it. And it was a really nicely styled car. It was actually street legal when you did it right. And they're very popular. And you go off road with them. They used to race in the Baja race, going down in Mexico. So I wanted to build something that would allow you to go out into the desert and go on the desert trails and go, just across the desert. So it was like a little mini dune buggy, and it used golf cart sized tires and wheels. It was built like that. And it's on the website. If you look at it there, you'll see the one that says all-terrain vehicle. And it was actually the first fast ATV. It was a fast little car. It would go 50 miles an hour in the desert, which was fun. So that was what actually ended up leading me to the two-seat car, because I sold the product to a company in California. The name of the company was Coot Industries, and all the ATVs back then, some of them were amphibious, had 6 wheels, and some of them were articulated, so they twist in the middle, and there's all kinds of different configurations. And the Coot vehicle was a rock crawler. It went real slow, it'd go about 15 miles an hour, but it would climb up over rocks and go a lot of places. And they wanted to add to their line. So we made a deal, and I sold them the product because I'd already had it developed. I was just ready to start building them myself, but they gave me a good deal and wanted to build the cars. So their plant was in Chico, California, which is Northern California up in the valley. And so I actually moved up there for 2 years and worked for them to get the thing started and get it in production. And then after that happened, and we got it going, they put me on their racing team. So I'd go out and race that car against other ATVs. It was a circuit all over the country that would go around and race. So I got paid for going around the country and racing my car against other ATVs. It was fun. It was a good job, and it wasn't actually a real job. I always bragged that I'd never had a real job, but it was my transition with them. So, and the CEO of the company knew Charles Schultz. So they got some model names to the cars. One was a Snoopy and one was a Red Baron. that was a product line, the Snoopy and the Red Baron.
Sounds like the most fun job in the world, by the way, going around and getting paid to race cars like that. That's a or quote unquote job in the world.
Yeah, and I could beat all those guys. It was depending on the course. It was really rough. I couldn't, but if there's any kind of open, mine was just way faster than theirs. So it was fun, and I got traveled all around and got to do that. But unfortunately for them, the Snoopy vehicle cannibalized the Coot vehicle because they used the same distributors, and they found out that the Snoopy could go almost everywhere the Coot could go. So instead of going over a big pile of rocks, it just went around it. And it was smaller, able to do that, and still had good ground clearance and everything. It could go a lot of places. So it ends up, we sold lots of Snoopies, but it started eating into their Coot vehicle sales.
I was going to say, always a bestseller, that Snoopy, no matter what form.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great name actually for it, and they did a little cartoon logo of Snoopy driving the car and everything. So anyway, what happened is the company ended up going out of business or getting ready to go bankrupt. And at that point, they had paid royalties to me for the early production of the vehicles. But the plant manager came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to be going belly up here," and gave me a warning and said, "If you'd like, we could give you some of these vehicles instead of having you just be in the bankruptcy." And so I ended up with a semi truck full of 53 of these little vehicles, and I had them. Actually, since they hadn't all built them or assembled all of them, I had them put them together with all the right accessories for what I wanted to do with it. So I took those 53 vehicles and moved back to Phoenix and opened up a dirt track, which ended up being at the same location where my later track was. It was called Baja Raceway, and it was a dirt track with two-seat cars. So that's where the two-seat concession car originated, right there.
That's amazing. I don't think there's too many people in the world that their story combines Snoopy and Stevie Nicks. That's a 1-2 punch right there.
Yeah, but anyway, so it was a successful business. It was, and we expanded and built a second one across other side of Phoenix on the west side, and it did well for a number of years. And then it was eventually replaced on the same piece of property. We built the Grand Prix racetrack. It was called Chaparral Grand Prix. Or actually, the one in Phoenix was Chaparral Speedway, and the one in Dallas was Chaparral Grand Prix.
So let's get, as I alluded to, laser focus. Let's talk laser tag. Many people have seen Star Wars, obviously, sometime. Maybe it's growing up or maybe it's more recently. But it often, especially those original Star Wars movies, often have the ability to inspire and want you to go out and piques interest in space or flying planes, something like that. But sometimes that doesn't really amount to anything besides it's just something fun to think about. For you, after seeing one of the Star Wars movies, it triggered this whole idea, which turned into a business and kind of pioneering an industry. Can you take us through the first time you saw Star Wars and how it started to click about this whole laser tag thing?
Yeah, I was in Las Vegas. I had a go-kart track in Las Vegas that I owned and operated. And I was in Las Vegas, and when the movie first came out, the original Star Wars movie, I went to the theater there to watch it. And I was just amazed by the special effects and everything. It was just, it was really groundbreaking back then. It was really something. And I recognized that scene running up and down the hallways of the ship is basically the same game that I played as a kid. You could play Army or whatever, and you go out and point your finger or have a stick to point or something, and you'd play, I got you, you got me, and then the game would usually end because you were arguing. So I recognized that. So that would really be fun if you could some way score it and keep track of the hits and misses and do all of that. So I did a little research and looked into what computers were available and what kind of electronics were available then. And this was 1977 when that came out. And it just didn't look like there was the hardware certainly wasn't there. And I realized you have to have software to support it too, which was not my thing. I had never done any kind of software development at that point. So I put it aside, and that was the same era as when I encountered Fleetwood Mac, and when I moved to Dallas in the early 80s, and got that going. So I had a track that was operating in Dallas, and I'd moved there and was doing all that. And the way the business structure was set up is that the celebrity investors, and there was a number of them besides just the Fleetwood Mac group, supplied the money, but they got the interest in the piece of land that we bought. This was out on a freeway out on the edge of town in Dallas, and now it's in the middle of the town. So the deal was they had most of their interest in the property, and then the operation serviced the debt. So the money we made from running the track would end up paying for the piece of property. So it was kind of a way to land bank, and it was a good concept, and it was working. But an offer came along for the property that was like triple or close to triple the value of it, the $1 million they paid for the property. And they said, we'll take it. So I wasn't in a position to stop that. And I never dreamed that that would happen and that they would be able to sell the property. So, I got a small piece of that, and, I still had made money with the track and everything. So all of a sudden, after a year and a half operation there, we had a very successful business, but we had to close it because the property was being sold to put a car dealer on it. It was about an 8-acre piece of ground. So at that point, I was out of a job. I was living in a city I'd only lived for 2 years, and I had to find something to do. I always have done serial, type business enterprises.
For a second, I thought you meant like Lucky Charms or Frosted Flakes when you said cereal, and then it clicked.
Yeah, you accusing me of bad jokes earlier.
No, I admit it. I'm caught red-handed here.
So anyway, I still had thought about the laser tag concept a lot of times during that time, and Dallas was a great place to be because Texas Instrument was there, and the guy that invented the computer chip was one of the guys that worked at TI. It was also the telecom headquarters of the United States. Nortel and a bunch of companies like that were right here in Dallas. So I had all kinds of good electronics and software talent all over Dallas. So I started looking into it, and there were some little Commodore 64, and there was some early Apple computers. And this was like 1981 when I started doing the research, almost 82. It looked feasible. So I found a guy out in Fort Worth that could actually do software and hardware, and had enough money to get him to get that part, at least prototyped, and figure out how it would work. And then once that worked, another good part of Dallas is we had a bunch of real estate people that were quite wealthy at the time because the town was booming, and still is today.
I was going to say, yeah, Dallas always feels like it's booming.
Yeah, it does. One of the lawyers that helped me put the deal together was, to buy the land and sign the deal with Fleetwood Mac. One of the lawyers here in Dallas said, okay, I've got some guys, and we put together a group. And I'd already got the early prototype working, just one-on-one type thing. Put some money together, and it was about $300,000. And with the $300,000, we were able to build the arena and all the equipment to open up. That's how one thing led to another.
And it's just like that. It's like a snap of the fingers.
It was a struggle. I mean, it was a very, very hard project, and particularly when we were on a budget like that. That was, even then, that wasn't a lot of money to build an arena and do everything I wanted to do. One of the things I knew had to happen is I knew it had to be what's now known as being immersive. We didn't think about that word then, but I knew it had to be really well done so you got the feeling of being on another planet doing this. So we were really big on the atmosphere in there, the sound effects and the fog in the place, and we even kept the temperature cold and did all these things to make you feel the part when you're in there, battling with other teams. So we just barely made it to get open with the budget we had, and it was an immediate hit success right from day one.
That's a really neat point there. It's something I hadn't thought about before, but like when I think back to especially birthday parties as a kid and the different laser tag venues that I've been to, the ones that stick out in my mind are the ones that make you feel like you're in a totally different place with the fog or with the music or just the way that the structures and neon and things like that are that make you feel in a really different place. So that's amazing that you did that so early on, and that was kind of a priority.
it really was a priority just to do it in that manner, because I know you could do it, on the cheap. At the time, I'd heard other people talk about the idea. It had come up over the years, so I thought it was time to get going and do it right.
In the actual phasers, the equipment, which was like the first thing that you developed, how many iterations did it take until you got a version that was like, all right, this is actually something that we could put out in front of people and they might have a good time with it?
Well, pretty early on, I came up with the idea, and we weren't allowed to shoot laser beams then. There was what's it called, the Bureau of Radiological Health.
I was going to guess that.
Yeah, that's always my first guess, and of course it's the Washington D.C. Bureau, and they wouldn't allow you to shoot lasers, even low-powered lasers, and the little laser pointers weren't even around that early on in the 80s. A laser was still some sort of scientific machine, back then. So you weren't allowed to point them and shoot them at people. So we really couldn't try to communicate shooting a laser, and you can modulate a laser so it put out a code. And actually, a lot of the laser tag now, even though they do have a theatrical visible laser beam, they're actually shooting an infrared beam, which is modulated, which is an invisible beam, of course. So we couldn't do that, and somehow I got on the idea that the phaser doesn't need to shoot a beam. If you made it receive a beam, then you don't have to have any lensing or any expensive work done on figuring out the optics of it. So if you put a receptor that sees an infrared signal come in, like the infrared, like you do to change your channel on your TV, if you put it in a long, narrow tube, you can imagine looking down a tube like that, and what you see is the only thing that can come in there. So it narrows it. It gives you an effect, a virtual parallel, straight, narrow beam by doing that. So that simplified the whole process. So the helmets and the chest pods that the players wore emitted their own signal, infrared signal. And so they're like a little beacon going around blinking, and each one had a different code. So once you get lined up with one, pull the trigger, you read their code, and you got a hit on them. And then through radio frequency, the fact they got hit would go back down to them and cause them to be disrupted. So it's called reverse IR. There's still one laser tag company that still does it in that manner. It still does it in reverse. So that really kept the cost down, and it actually worked better for what we were doing.
That's a brilliant discovery. I've never thought about it working backwards. When I think about the early days of laser tag, I can imagine as somebody who started it, you're probably thinking that this is really, really cool and fun, and when we bring it to life, like, people love this. But there's the whole technology side that you were just mentioning with infrared and the Bureau of, I forget what it's called already even, but like, how did you learn and become familiar enough with things like infrared and reverse IR, things like that, which I guess is reverse infrared, in order to actually turn this into a live product?
Well, I guess I'm a quick learner. Always have been.
Comes in handy.
I think I took one electrical engineering class in college, and I was a mechanical engineer. I grew up in a mechanical era, and I got with the guy. Like I said, this guy, his name is Jim Dooley, and he was really, really good at this. And I just learned quickly about, okay, here's how circuits work. I knew in general how physics. I know physics really well. I took advanced physics, 2 years in high school. It was a full 2-year course, so I was good at that. I understood, the math and how everything worked, and that I picked it up. I just learned on the fly. I never did learn to code or anything like that, and he was able to do that, to put together some simple code to make the initial one work. And then, after we got going and got running, it got better and better because I hired better and better engineers, and we ended up putting together a lot better than the very earliest versions were put together.
This is all starting to make more and more sense, because so you clearly you're humble about it, but you have your studies in certain areas, engineering and physics. And like me, for example, when you mentioned that TV remotes use infrared, like, that blew my mind right there. So kind of different levels of understanding here.
My first prototype that I was pulling up before I even met Jim Dooley, my first thing I did was get an old TV and a remote and start testing to see what it would do. And then I actually put it in a cardboard tube and did all that. And I even discovered, the idea of the reverse IR before I ever went to see dueling. So that was just built in right from the start. But invention is applied physics. You just have to take what's there, and it's applied engineering. So whatever is out there, you just borrow somebody else's development. And that, a TV remote back then, they weren't RF, they were direct line of sight, and it was perfect. It worked, and they were actually fairly inexpensive for the components.
So you have it live. People are starting to use it. You're actually getting this out to the public, and people are going in there and zapping each other and all sorts of new made up words. But what was the marketing angle with this? How did you make this totally new concept appeal to people?
Well, I hired some good PR people in Dallas, and then I got a big break that really was kind of an accident. The Republican National Convention, 1984, which is the year we opened the facility, was in Dallas. So we were able to go. I had limos and even a little small bus to go down to the convention center and pick these people up and bring them out to play Photon. It just generated publicity, and we got publicity all over the world in a very short amount of time. All the dailies and Time magazine and Forbes magazine, and then John Stossel was the one that really put us on the map. And that was a little later on when we were getting ready to franchise, or had just franchised, that Stossel did a piece on 2020. Remember Barbara Walters and John Stossel and Hugh Downs on that show. And back then, a network TV show, had like a 25 million viewer audience. So we had 25 million people see. 1/3 of their hour show was devoted to Photon. And that's what put us on the map, and that's what sold all of our franchises. And the publicity was big until then, but then it got huge after that.
They say any publicity is good publicity, but having a third of a show that has millions and millions of viewers is very, 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 very good publicity. So you got that big break there. How did that change the business?
Well, it just put it on hyperdrive at that point. Everything was going faster. So we still couldn't convince bankers or any financial people that this wasn't a fad. I heard that word so many times. So the only business plan we could come up with to be able to expand was to do franchising. So we set up franchises and sold franchises, all over the United States. At our peak, we had 45 open facilities. We had sold 70 franchises thereabouts, and there's a big upfront fee. But a lot of the people couldn't put the money together or couldn't get the approval for going in the city or whatever. And then we got them open, unfortunately. We had ended up with 3 company-owned stores, 2 in Dallas and 1 in Southern California, which was by far the biggest grossing one of all the ones we had. We put a double-sized field together in Fountain Valley, California. So we had our own, income from those company-owned facilities plus the franchise business. So, but we were never able to raise any money through any conventional means. So that was the drawback.
When you look back, what was the biggest tweak or refinement that you made to the actual gameplay based on some customer feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our people that work for us, the technical people, and we had the facility we had was in one of these office warehouse type spaces, and so the building, the space right next door in the same building was our R&D center, and that's where all the engineers worked and the software writers and that. And we actually had a door that would go right onto the playing field. So they played it and enjoyed it, and they were very competitive at it. And early on, right at the start, this became a young man's game. 21, I think, was our average age at that point. It wasn't a kid's game at that point. And we played it competitively, and we allowed people to run, which they don't do anymore. They don't allow you to run in these games. And
I've definitely gotten yelled at several times for that at birthday parties growing up, by the way. That makes sense.
Yeah, it was like a sport. And then our own customers invented, the competitiveness of it they came up with the idea when you entered to play, when you go through this, we call it the entry terminal, where you actually would show your little card, your ID card with a barcode on it, and scan it, and then we would type in the name that would appear on the scoreboard as they're playing. And they started making up all these names, all these, Rambo was a favorite one. But anyway, they would make up all these names, and they got very competitive. So we started having leagues play on Wednesday nights, typically the slowest night of the week for any kind of amusement business. So it ended up being our busiest night of the week, and the place was jammed. And we had an observation deck on the field. And another key to the field was it was symmetrical. You had a left and right, a mirror image, and you had a red side and a green side with a base tower. And it was like capture the flag, where you had to go, attack the other base while you're trying to defend your base at the same time with your team. And it was important to make this a team sport also, because we put 20 people out there to play, and there would be one winner and 19 losers if you just had them playing free for all. So by making it teams, I mean, even if you were the winning player on the losing team, that was okay. So by being on a team and having the team be close to the other team, it took away the stigma of only one person winning. So that was really important, and we played that up. So they invented this thing of having leagues and being competitive. And you could go up an observation deck, and the observation deck went down the center line that separated the two sides of the arena. And it was a double deck arena. You had ramps and things where you could go up on the top, or you could be down in the tunnels and things down below. And so you could watch the whole thing from up there. And that observation deck would fill up on those nights, and people would be cheering and yelling. And it was nuts. It was so much fun. It's just unbelievable.
It is, and those little tweaks are magical. Like just a little difference or a little idea, or let's try this, let's try something else out, can really bring more life into it and make people go nuts. And so here we are. You've created something that has made many, many, many people go nuts. What aspect makes you smile the most when you look back on your creation? What
makes me smile is watching other people smile for things I've done. And it's just I hear this so much about, you made my childhood fun. I mean, I hear that all the time, and just watching people drive go-karts or, do fun stuff and get off laughing and joking and having a good time. So that's what makes me smile.
Well, you made my childhood fun. Fun stuff. And so is your own personal podcast, except for when it starts sucking up all your time. That's what I'm here to help with. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com for help saving time with your high-quality podcasts. I will take loads and loads of that time editing, planning, even help with the marketing elements off your plate, so you can go back and focus on doing the things you love and focus on other aspects of your business and just the truly fun parts of your podcast. Hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com. Now, let's hear George get even more inventive on his inventiveness or tenacity. Here's George. I'd love to dive into more of your inventions and I guess your overall inventing philosophy. So, in addition to laser tag, you've touched plenty of different areas that you invented, and including concession cars, race cars, as you mentioned. There's a racetrack dryer. See, racetrack driver would make more sense, you would think, but no, you're a genius beyond that. And bumper boats. The list goes on and on and on. Overall, why do you invent things?
Well, I don't know. It's just I set out to do it. It's on purpose, not by accident. So I've just always been creative with things, and I've always been able to. I guess my best talent is I can look at anything and see how it works. I can go in a factory that builds things, and if I look around, I can see how everything works. I can look at a system, a simple system or a really complex system, and I just understand the physics of it and just how everything needs to work. It just, to me, it's just logical. I've just always had that ability to be able to look at even complex systems and say, this has got to happen for this to work. And I guess I've applied that to things that I like. I mean, all these things, I like cars, I build cars and do that as a hobby, and I like boats and having fun on the lake and everything. And so most of my stuff was oriented toward that, toward some sort of fun.
Yeah, I don't know why you strive to have so much fun. That just sounds miserable.
The hardest part is to identify the need or the problem. And when people come to me and say, how would you do this? I can usually come up with the correct way and think about it, and then it ends up being done that way. And I thought, okay, I was right about that. And a lot of people will try to invent things that really don't have a problem. They have a solution to no problem, and that never does well. But my stuff has always went back and was oriented around have something to have fun with. Even the racetrack dryer stuff. I've been on one of my things I've loved in life was watching the Indy 500 and going there to the races and doing that. So when I was developing the track vac track dryer, I got to go around all over the country to different racetracks at their nickel to come in with my track drying prototype and do some of the track drying during race day. So that was fun for me to be able to go out and be walking around Gasoline Alley at Indy and walking down pit road during a live event going on the Indy 500 and going to all the NASCAR tracks around the country. So that was really a lot of fun for me doing that.
That's really cool. You've certainly dried more racetracks than the average person. That's for sure.
We did it different. Our machine it had a foam roller on it, kind of like you dry a tennis court with. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
Yeah, definitely.
It would roll the water out in front of this roller, and then I had a vacuum on it, a big suction device that would basically catch that and pull the water up into a tank. And the other drying method that's always been used on racetracks is they go out with a jet dryer. They have a big jet engine on the truck, and it blows this, jet exhaust is this, hot air basically. So our T-shirts for Track Vac, the company, was "They blow, we suck," and that got a lot of attention. I walked into the president of NASCAR wearing one of those shirts one time to talk to him about it. So everybody enjoyed the humor.
Always. It certainly didn't suck. You mentioned something with your knack for identifying how stuff works and looking at stuff and coming up with ideas, or I guess coming up with solutions. What tips do you have for having these things click together in your brain and actually make sense in a timely fashion like you're able to do?
I don't know if I have any tips. It just came so naturally to me. I mean, my mom tells me, and by the way, my mom's still alive. She's 98. My mom tells me that when I was, a little kid crawling around on the floor, that I'd always take things apart. So she had to watch me because I'd go start taking the appliances apart and stuff. And I've just always had that kind of knack. And I remember one time, I was born in Chicago, and we moved to Phoenix when I was 5. My dad liked to go out in the desert, and because it was all new to us, everything after being from Chicago.
Lake Michigan is only slightly different than the Arizona desert scene.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one time we drove I forgot if it was a pickup or a sedan, but anyway, we drive a car that wasn't really intended to go out in the desert. And he was a construction worker. He's an electrician, and he had his buddies, and he was in his late 20s then. He had his friends who were about the same age, and a group of them used to go out, and he would take me occasionally, and we'd be out driving around these desert trails and stuff around Phoenix. And there was this one place west of Phoenix that used to be a tank proving ground, because of the World War II wasn't that long ago at that point in time. They'd been like in the mid 50s, and I was probably 6 or 7, and one of the guys in one of the cars got a flat tire, and back then you had bumper jacks. I don't know if you remember that, but you had to get this jack out of your car, and then it would clip onto the bumper, and you use the handle to lift it up. And it was in the sand. It was kind of on this kind of tip to one side on the trail, and other guys all stood around and tried to help or give them a hard time. And I was sitting there watching the whole thing, the whole process. And he'd jack it up and get down near the top, and then it would slip off the jack because it was the ground wasn't that stable. It was sandy and everything. And they kept trying this and tried to stack rocks underneath the jack, and that didn't work. So they just sat there and couldn't get it done. And I just said to my dad, why don't you just take your shovel and dig out underneath the tire when you get it about halfway up, and just dig the sand out so then you can pull the tire off. And they looked at me and they looked at each other and tried it, and it worked. And that was like 6 or 7, and all these construction worker types, most supposed to know how to do things, didn't figure it out, and I did. So I just know that it's just sort of natural to me. Just saw the solution by just sitting there watching these guys try to do that.
And the opposite side of that is the problem side. So you mentioned it's much more challenging to identify problems or identify needs for something. How have you been able to keep your eyes and ears and fingers and everything open? That sounded weird. In order to find needs and problems like this.
Yeah, well, I don't. Other people, mention something to me, and I've done work with other people, helping them come up with ideas, and then most of my ideas were not based on a problem; they're more based on a need to have fun, that sort of thing. There used to be a problem with jet skis, where they would, if you let go of the throttle, they won't steer. So if you're going 40 miles an hour in a straight line, and you back off the throttle because you see something in front of you that you're going to hit, and you turn the handlebars, it won't turn because you need a jet thrust to make it turn.
That sounds like a big problem.
It is a big problem, and a lot of people were really hurt seriously with that. So they solved it now with brakes. They've got a thrust reverser on almost all the current jet skis now. But I came up with something that solved that problem, and we put it on one of the a jet ski I owned just to try it and everything. It made a huge difference, and it was actually fun. It turned really sharp too if you did that. So there've been things like that where I see a need and do something. It never went anywhere commercially, but because the jet ski companies themselves, solved the problem in a different manner. But anyway, so I don't always see the problem. But somebody comes to me and can describe the problem. But a lot of people think there's a problem, but it really isn't. And like I said, they've got a solution, but no problem.
Well, that's a lot of time and effort and energy. I just combined money and energy has been wasted over the years, and businesses being built around something that really didn't deserve a business to be around. So that's an important distinction as well. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get even more unusual. And so this is a segment we do often on the show, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit from your standpoint, because you have so many cool and fascinating and crazy different inventions that you've, invented. And this could be for any of your inventions, but what's the most unusual reaction someone has had to using one of your inventions? I mean, just like their perception or feedback right after using it.
Well, I think it has to be laser tag. And there's been so many just completely nuts fans I've had that just, go crazy, and just the reaction is beyond what a person should do. So I would say it's probably laser tag. They just
what do you mean? Give us a picture. What's an example of a reaction that's beyond what a person should do?
They're like groupies. We've had some reunions and stuff, like a 30-year reunion a while back, where I went and just, everybody in the place had to get a picture of me, and they just, I don't know. I'm not that way. I've never asked for an autograph from a person in my life. And I just find it kind of embarrassing that somebody wants my autograph. So
I was going to ask for yours, but I'll stop that right now. I feel I've embarrassed you enough already.
Yeah, laser tag. It touched more people, and there's, I don't know how many people played all around the world now, but it's hundreds of millions of people, maybe a billion. I don't know. So it's laser tag without a doubt.
So let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. Some laser speed or reverse infrared speed rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
I think so.
All right. I'm sure you are. First one, can I have your autograph? No, I'm just kidding. What is your favorite car model of all time?
Corvette.
Any specific year or version of it?
I've had a bunch of them, and if you look at my website, you'll see a car there that doesn't look anything like a Corvette, but it's a Corvette under the skin. So I bought a Corvette. I irritated all the Corvette people in the world by sawing up a perfectly good Corvette to make it into a different kind of car. An
incognito Corvette. An in Corvette. Who's your favorite Star Wars character of all time?
Han Solo.
Sold. I'm more thinking in the last 20 years or so. What's an invention that somebody else created that you see today and impacts our lives that you are just really, really fascinated by?
It's really very recent. I think that Elon Musk, I'm not a big fan of his electric car. I like electric cars, but I think his recoverable rocket I think that's just brilliant, to not have that big booster rocket drop in the ocean every time, like they used to, like NASA did. So now they come back and land, and he uses it again. So I think that was a great invention.
Yeah, it's crazy. Talk about like out of this world stuff, return to this world stuff. But that technology is nuts. And then last one, you mentioned the addition of names with laser tag. So you mentioned Rambo and some names like that. If you had a nickname to show up on the laser tag board, what would it be?
Well, I had one, and I didn't give it to myself. The fans did. I was the creator, so I played as creator.
Perfect. Here we go. I'm starting to get a sense of taking things too far because there might be a little bit of warship vibes or everybody bound down to you. But really, really cool.
I told you I went too far.
Exactly. Well, George, thank you so much. This has been awesome, and really, really appreciate what you've done and taking the time to share your insights and love for Star Wars here today. In addition to CarterInventions.com, is there anywhere else you want to shout out where people can learn more?
Now that I've moved into East Texas and kind of off the grid, I kind of like it. So I think just they can put a message there. It gets to me at the website. So let's just do it that way. And there's one other thing I didn't mention, and I think it affected my whole life about doing what I did as far as my profession. I got to meet Walt Disney when I was about 10 years old. And I think that meeting and me loving Disneyland so much probably has something to do with the direction I went in life. We grew up, like I told you, I grew up in Phoenix, and Los Angeles is only 400 miles away, so we were over there frequently. And my great aunt, my father's aunt, was private secretary to William Randolph Hearst Jr., and he was running the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper. Disneyland wasn't real popular when it opened in 1955. It was way out in Anaheim and in the orange groves out there, and not everybody would drive out there. So he was after the paper for publicity and that sort of thing. So we got to go to Disneyland a lot, and I got to have a VIP pass for all the rides, go to the front of the line, all that sort of thing. And on one of the visits there, we went up to his office above the firehouse on Main Street, and got to meet him. And I think that might have had something to do, with what I ended up doing in life.
I think so. Oh my God. The word of the day is nuts, but that's absolutely nuts. Never spoken to anybody who's met Walt Disney. You are one of a kind with the combination of Stevie Nicks, Snoopy, and Walt Disney now.
There's others. I had a call from Kanye West about 2 years ago.
No way. Wait, what was that about?
I got an email first from somebody representing himself as being a business manager or something. And he said, would you take a call from Mr. West? And I went to a friend of mine that's an IT guy, and I said, is this a legitimate email, or is this some sort of scam? And he said, no, it's legitimate. And I answered back, said, sure, okay. And I was out working in a shop at the time, and I get this call, and it was Kanye. And he said, can you come and visit me? He said, I like your stuff. We saw your laser tag thing. Can you come and visit me? And I said, well, maybe when? And this is right when COVID was starting in the early 20. And he wanted me to come right away. And I said, well, no, I can't just drop everything. But, and he was up in his ranch in Wyoming. And I said, well, I got to talk to my wife. Well, bring her along. And I said, I really don't want to fly on an airplane with COVID going on. I said, I'll send a jet for you.
No way.
We ended up going up to Cody, Wyoming, me and my wife, it was about 2 weeks later. And he wanted to talk about laser tag, and he said, the world needs fun things, and I want to talk to you about it. And he had his whole entourage up there at this ranch that was, probably about 10 miles from Cody, and put us in a hotel in Cody. And then we got, Learjet arrived at the airport right close to where we lived, and it was our first trip on a private jet, and flew up there and landed there, and a person drives up in this big Ford Raptor pickup truck, all in flat black, and gets us in and drives us out to the ranch. And we go there and we get to meet him and have lunch with him and his entourage, and we get to watch a podcast he did, Nick Cannon in it, and got to sit there while they were doing it. And we're there for 2 days, and it was a really interesting interesting thing. So, so you know, having invented laser tag opens all kinds of doors. There's all kinds of people that contact me all the time. So, you included.
I would say so. Me, Kanye, and Walt Disney, 3 Ps in a pod. But that is again out of this world, and such a cool experience. And you never know what a little passion for inventing can turn into. So then you're living proof of that. So this has been amazing. I know I use that word all the time, but it truly is. And before we sign off here, is there any other larger than life figure that you have an interaction with? Because I feel like this could just keep going for 3 hours.
Let me think. I went to high school with Steven Spielberg.
Okay, you're just making stuff up.
No. And actually, Wonder Woman also went there. Linda Carter. It was in Phoenix, in the Scottsdale School District. Opened a brand new school in 1959, and I was a freshman that year, so I was the first class to go all the way through the thing. And they put in really good teachers. They recruited from all over the state, and they recruited really good coaches for the sports teams. And it was really a truly inspirational high school. And Spielberg nobody knew him because I guess he was in his garage making films or something. But he went there. He was a year younger than me, and Linda Carter is several years younger than me. And her brother was a good friend of mine because we went to grade school together in high school, and then they actually went in the same fraternity in college and everything. You have the same last name, you end up standing in line together, because they alphabetize everybody. So look it up, Arcadia High School in Phoenix. And there was an astronaut that went there too, so there's something about that place.
Yeah, there's something in the water. I think they're serving you all extra electrolytes with your beverages. I don't know.
So yeah, that's pretty much the famous people. I mean, there's been a bunch of for some reason, the celebrities like to come to the racetracks, and they like to come to the Photon facilities and stuff. Chevy Chase used to come to the one in Southern California all the time. He was a big fan of playing Photon. It attracts certain people and they're celebrities, and they kind of expect special treatment, which we gave them. We let them kind of have their own in the place because everybody else enjoys watching them too.
Turns out celebrities enjoy fun too. Well, you have your IMDb resume of connections might be longer than your invention resume. That's just incredible. Last thing, George, final thoughts. It could be a quote or just words to live by, short and sweet, whatever you want. Send us home here.
Take the time to have fun.
George Carter III, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your amazing stories, inventions, inventing philosophies, physics that I still don't quite understand, but I'm amazed and fascinated and mind blown. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are fantastic podcasts and podcast recommendations. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild. Bring on the bongos!